Good morning, everybody. I gotta say, Darlene looks the most enthusiastic. I like knowing everybody whose face we can see on the screen. Okay, so we are gonna get started right away since we have 45 minutes and we know that the track and field group can chat. So hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for tuning in to the Move United 2020 Fall Competition Meetings. This session is focused on track and field. I think I know everyone here, but my name is Jessie Cloy and I'm a competition manager with Move United. For anybody who is watching this after today, we have recorded today's session and we have recorded all of our sessions from our Move United Fall Competition meetings, and they are going to be made available on the Move United website. At the conclusion of all of our sessions, we will send out a link for easy access. So before I turn it over to our presenters today, we'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. To minimize distractions, we ask that all attendees mute your mic. Please use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen to submit questions. You know, we are kind of like a family here in this group, so if you have a question, feel free to unmute and ask that. We just ask that you don't interrupt the speakers if you're able to wait. We'll reserve some time at the end to address any outstanding questions, and feel free to also use the chat feature to just say hello to everybody, introduce yourself, things like that. So we have multiple sessions scheduled today and we can't go over our time because this next session will start immediately 15 minutes after, and we can't start that session until this one is over. So if need be, we will abruptly end this meeting and then continue it at a later time. We can schedule another meeting if we need it. So we're happy to do that. Okay, so I am gonna turn it on over to Phil.
Hey, how are you? Good morning. I know most of you, I know all of you. So that was nice to see. We're gonna, well, let's put up the slides, Jess, and then we can get started. So we're gonna have three presenters today, myself, Denise Hutchins, and then I'm gonna bring in Kevin Kreitzer to show you some work that we've been doing on the website. So, all right, so next slide. So today we're gonna talk about track and field, the rules and regulations, the review of the competition quick tip document that has been updated. So it'll give everybody a one-page, one-place document so that you can understand what you have to do to be either a level 1, a level 2, or a level 3 track and field meet. We're going to talk about qualifying standards for junior nationals, records and results, general resources, and then contacts. Okay, next slide. So the Track and Field USA is the is our track and field arm of Move United. We have for the last 50 years or so given the rights to track and field, sanctioning of track and field to Adaptive Sports USA / Move United, and that will continue going forward. So we're very happy with that relationship. We're just about at the final stages of a memo of understanding between the two organizations to keep this going in the future. All the information that we have for track and field is located in one spot. It's on the Adaptive Track and Field USA.org website. If you haven't been there, I suggest that you go and see it and take advantage of it. We are adding a lot of information to it this year. Hopefully it'll become a resource for para track and field throughout the country. So next slide. So the rules and regulations for track and field, I think we don't have to talk about this very much, but everybody knows. First of all, World Athletics controls track and field for the world. Para track and field is done by the international IPC organization, World Para Athletics. And then and they own the space for U17, U20, and the open categories. And although they say they also control it for masters, we haven't seen any significant progress in the master space. Adaptive Track and Field USA in the United States works in cooperation with US Paralympics. And within that framework, we control the variations of the rules for the U11 and U14 and the Masters groups in the country. And then we follow the rules for World Parathletics for the U17, U20, and U23 classes. If you would like to see the rules, they are on our rules page. And that's, if you go to that hyperlink, you can get to both our rules as well as the rules for WPA. So I know that when I type in and want to go to the World Parathletics rule book, it takes me 2 or 3 different gyrations to get there through Google. If you go to our page for rules, and then you can just click on it and it'll bring the rule book, the current rule book page at World Parathletics right up there, so you can click on it and get there quickly. Next slide. Yeah, US Paralympic Track and Field is the national governing body for track and field in the United States. It doesn't set the rules, but it makes sure that the World Parathletics rules for athletics is carried out in the United States. USA Track and Field, USATF, is the NGB for able-bodied only. They really don't want to control para athletics in the United States, but they do have the certification and the ability, and also the rights to have the officials certified in the United States. So they certify the officials in the sport, and they do that by having their officials take the para test, and then also and then once they do that, which is built by a committee that is that we control, USA Track, Wheelchair Track and Field USA controls the committee, and we have members from US Paralympics as well as all the TDs in the United States on that committee. So we produce the test and the course, and that will be renewed for 21 through 24, probably around 12-15. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Denise, and then I'm also going to turn the television off. Thanks.
No. Am I here?
Yes, we can hear you, Denise.
Okay, all right. So I really feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, guys. But we really want to go through the different levels of sanctioning, because over the years we've tweaked it a little bit. So just trying to get a little more definition for everybody. I think we all know you have to have a legal 400-meter track, but the track survey is the one that needs to be submitted for the level 3 meet, which is our highest level meet. The level 1s are our recreation meets, level 2s are the in-between, and then the level 3s are the ones that we consider to be the kind of the WPA standard. So the track survey has to be submitted for that, because the results have to be put in with the track survey to know that it's certified. And the lanes need to be the 40-inch with the 2-inch stripe on the right side. That's not to say that we can't add events. All of the, I think we all have a few special events that we like to add into different, just because of our different clients and different athletes that we have. And that could be anything that you choose. That's because all the events have to be offered that are para athlete classes. That's not to say you can't put other ones in. The electronic timing has to be done for anything below the 1500 for the level 3 meets. It's certainly optional for the level 1 and 2. The wind gauge has to be used for all the straightaway races and the 200 meter, as well as long jump and triple jump. And I would highly recommend that you, if you're using electronic timing, that you ask your electronic timer if they have that wind gauge. And that's sometimes a little extra charge, but it certainly helps. If you've got that tied right into your timing system, then you don't have to have somebody recording it and then hand entering it. But I think it's something that not every timing automatically brings. So just make sure that you're asking your timer to bring that to the meet, or if it's part of their package. The seated events obviously can be on a turf field. All the ambulatory events for the level 2 and 3 must be held in the regulation venues with the concrete circles. One thing I would add, I know at one of our sites, you do not put the ring inside the circle until competition. So again, that's something you may want to check with the meet director or whoever your contact is at the track to make sure that the ring gets inside a pre-poured concrete circle if it's not permanent there. Same thing with the takeoff board for the long jump and triple jump. Most places do not leave their competition board in, but it's something you need to ask them for because they're not going to think right offhand, oh, you may need this takeoff board. So make sure that you're asking that ahead of time. So you're not scrambling the day of the meet to go, oh my gosh, I don't have a competition board. High jump obviously needs to be run approved high jump venue, solid surface with the mat. I would also make sure that you double check the cover on the high jump just to make sure that that's holding all of those foam blocks, and you don't want those separating when somebody jumps in them. And I know many of the high schools, the covers don't always stay real intact. So that's something you just want to check because you want those foams staying close so one doesn't scoot out to the side when somebody jumps on it. Then as far as the officials, you want to make sure that you've got at least one certified official for the level 2 and level 3 meets in your pits. I truly recommend 2 because if you've just got one, that means you've got one certified official either watching to make sure it's a legal throw or watching to see where it lands. And we've all been at those competitions where whoever's out in the field misses the mark significantly, does not do well with the athletes or the spectators. If your marker in the field is off, they watch. So if you can get 2 officials, so much better. You can have a volunteer out there helping, but I would highly recommend that you have an official watching the landing. Then for tracks, you want to have at least 4, 5 if you don't have somebody at the electronic wind gauge operator. So certainly you want key people at the referee finish line, your starters, umpires, and the umpires, I think we'll go through that a little bit later, but you need at least 3 umpires for each of the curves. Usually somebody at the finish line can handle that first turn 1, but you want somebody in the others. If you have a lot of athletes, you may want more officials around the track just to watch for little bumping and infractions between officials, because we know that's when athletes tend to do things, is in between the officials. So the officials, you need to make sure they're safe sports certified. I think we can't go over this enough, that's just such a huge part liability-wise for our organizations, and it's just the smart thing to do for the athletes, just to make sure that everybody's playing on the same page. and that we're following those rules and regulations. Weights and measures officials are needed for level 3. They do have to sign off on that record sheet that they have weighed that implement before and after for a record. So it's very, very important to have that key person in there. I would recommend that that be a person who's not doing officiating, because they're going to be really busy moving the implements in and out, checking them in, redoing records. So it's very important that somebody is there doing weights and measures all the time. Volunteer officials, you can certainly use them. Level 1 can be all volunteer officials, except for your referee, who should be certified. The rest of level 2 and level 3, certainly volunteer officials, can be utilized as those extra hands in the competition area. Very, very valuable resource for all of us. Just lost my document. There we go. So all of the results for level 2 and level 3, this is why you want to move up to those levels, can be used to qualify for junior nationals or for U.S. Paralympic nationals and trials. So those are very important to make sure that you have all of that information provided that is needed. The results for juniors can be submitted for national records, as can open and masters for at all the level 3 meets, not at level 2. So again, you may want to have somebody appointed to do records. It's a huge undertaking. Pam has, we've simplified the form over the years, but I think the key things that Pam Cheveroli has told us that's missing from those is obviously the date, the year of birth, their classification. Those tend to get skipped. So there's a line for everything that is needed. If it's not filled in, we can't certify the results and give the athlete a record. I hate to have athletes miss records because as a meet director, I didn't fill in the form right. So I think that's key, just to make sure that every part of that record form is filled in properly before you send it in. Pam does not have that information to fill in, so you need to make sure. I know I started getting a list of all the athletes with their date of birth to give to my records people, so that they can just double check the date of birth on the record form. Then they don't have to go back and bother people. That form is all filled out. The other thing is to make sure on the record form, and I think most of us who've done this for a while know, if you fill in the blanks ahead of time for the name of the meet, the venue site, the date of the meet, before you make copies, it makes it a whole lot easier. I even fill in the officials' names, their USATF number, so that they don't have to fill that in on every form, especially for track. And then the referee at the bottom, I fill in their name and their USATF number, so that all that's completed before I ever make copies of it. Saves a lot of time at the end. So going down to some of the venue, most of this, again, you just have to make sure you have enough venue space. For ambulatory athletes, again, if you're using an approved site, all of these should be filled in already. The problem I think most of us run into is that we're using high schools, and very few high schools have javelin runways. So you just want to try to get an area that's level and as smooth as possible, preferably paved, but there's many, many sites where you can't, there's obviously not pavement you can use. The other thing is to make sure the day before you go out and check the jump pits, and make sure that they're filled up to the level. we have a problem with this in Oklahoma because of our wind. We'll fill it 2 days ahead of time, and we have 20-mile-an-hour winds for 2 days, and suddenly all of our sand is in Kansas, and we have to go double check the morning of the event to make sure. So we try to have extra sand in alternate pits that we can use, but it needs to be flush with the surface. The other thing that many of the older jump areas are narrow. The new regulations are for wider ones. If you do not have the wide landing area, I would highly recommend that you put orange cones on the concrete just outside the landing pit. So from the end of the runway, the athletes can visualize what that landing pit actually looks like. Seated field, again, you're just going to need to, space is the biggest thing with this. You need something about 12 yards wide, just for the landing area, and then anywhere from 20 to 50 yards long, or meters. Let's probably change that to meters, guys. Just helps to make sure that your landing areas are not crossing each other, which creates a huge hazard for officials who happen to be standing out there when the javelin's going off in the next pit. So making sure that everything is safe and far enough apart. And then making sure that you have area to put your stakes in. And having personally been part of a busted irrigation system at 2 universities, you want to get the irrigation system mapped to know where those pipes are, so we can hammer those 15-inch stakes into the ground. You're not getting their irrigation system. For seated discus, this has been the new thing the last few years, is that for the discus in the club, they must have cages around them. If you're not throwing out of the discus cage, you must come up with some kind of portable cage. And we have put up many different options, everything from snow fencing to soccer nets. So the rules have the specific sizes where they have to be positioned. So just make sure you're following those. Then the plywood or the platforms are nice to have. It keeps the chairs from sinking in soft ground. It makes a more solid surface. Recommended, but not mandatory, certainly. For the track, you want to make sure that try to do a walkthrough when you're doing your site visit. Make sure that the surface is intact, that we have been to different sites where the track is in less than ideal condition, makes it a hazard for the athletes. So we want to try to avoid that. Lane markings obviously need to be consistent. And if you get that survey, it should have where all the lane markings are, which is very helpful if you have really faded lines, so that you know immediately, oh yeah, this is the 200 start, this is the 800, because some of the tracks have different markings than our regulation, and you want the athletes starting at the right place so that they're doing the legal events. Then to make sure that the call room is close to the track, I personally would also make sure that you have a porta pot of some kind, because that's always where the athletes have to go to the bathroom, is at the last minute, is in the call room. Make sure that obviously you've got liquid there for them, so that especially if it's hot, try to get the shade early in the year. In the cooler, you may not need that, but it also comes in real handy when you're in Chicago and you have 44 degrees with wind and rain. It's nice to have a cover. So classification, I know there's another course coming up Friday on classification, but we've just kind of put the brief summary in there. The 10 impairments that we, for WPA, work with are impaired muscle power, impaired range, leg length difference, limb deficiency, short stature, visual impairment, intellectual impairment, and then the 3 neurological: hypertonia, ataxia, and apoptosis. Visual impairment, intellectual impairment, and short stature are ambulatory only. All of the others can be ambulatory or seated. So that's good to know when you're going through those. It's a little confusing. We all know classification is not the fun thing for meet directors, but it's something you need to be really familiar with, especially when you're trying to heat events or figure out where athletes need to go. One of the things that you may want to do when you do registration is to put something on the form that at least says whether they're seated or standing. Until they go through classification, you're not going to know exactly, but at least you'll get them either in the seated pits or the ambulatory pits. So it's a little easier to jockey somebody between pits than between events. Oh my gosh, he's in the seated, that throws that off. Or so just try to, that's just a little help when you're trying to seed the events until you actually get the athletes classed, to at least know whether they're seated or standing. Then the officials, I think we went through here. The technical delegate is for only the ones that are WPA sanctioned, and that TD is the sign. That's the technical delegate is assigned by the WPA for your event. Referees, you want to have at least 1 track and 1 field. If they're separate times, you can use 1 person. I have my field events so spread out at Endeavor, I often have 3 officials because the difference in my long jump and my discus is almost a 1/4 of a mile. And then shot put is way off to the side. So I also supply a golf cart to a couple of my referees so that they can cover that territory. Just little things. You want to make sure you've got enough referees for all of your pits if there's a question. Field events, I think we went over the field officials, recommended to use 2 officials or more. Certainly 3 is best practice, but if you can put 2 officials in there, you've at least got somebody watching the throws and somebody watching the landing. Track officials we went through already. The starters, obviously you need at least 1 starter, but we recommend you have 2 starters, 1 for starting and 1 for recall. It's very hard for the starter to see the first and the last to be able to recall. So if he's watching lanes 1 through 4, it's hard. If somebody false starts in 7 or 8, he may not see them. So a recall starter is very necessary for that. Clerk of course, again, depending on the athletes that you have, if you have a small meet, 1 clerk may be able to do it. Bigger meets, you may want 3 with 7 or 8 volunteers to help with all those little numbers. Umpires, a minimum of 3, preferably 4, up to 6 is good for the bigger events so that they can be on the straightaway as well as the curves. And then you want 1 person at the finish line really kind of coordinating and acting as the kind of the go-between between the so they can know who doesn't show up at the start and get that information readily distributed. If you're running a level 2 or level 1 and you don't have all the certified officials, you want to at least have your field referee and track referee certified. And certainly you can use USATF officials, high school officials, so long as they have experience with the implements that are being contested. You don't want although I've worked at high school meets where the football coach is doing shot put, but you really want certified high school officials who do that event, helping you with the level 1 or level 2 meets. A couple of variables, the number of seated field athletes. This is always our nightmare, is how do you divide the athletes? I would like to say that there is no logical way to do that usually. especially with our regional meets that have registration with a short turnaround before the event. And then the lovely classification where you never know what's going to happen with those athletes, but you have to do your best to get them divided, keeping in mind for most meets, it's about 15 minutes per athlete per implement. If you got athletes throwing all 3 implements, that means you need to figure out 45 minutes per athlete. If you got 6 athletes in the pit, that comes out to be about 4 hours, which is about as long as you really should keep the athletes and the officials tied up. So you may want to have more sessions, or if you can get more officials, have more pits. So you can group the athletes by age group, classification, gender. You can combine male and female in the pits, just make sure the results go in separate. And then trying to keep the number of athletes down. Obviously, if you've got the same age, class, and gender, and you have a whole bunch in that class, they all have to throw together. You cannot divide them. So that's always that interesting when you've got combining athletes and then they go through classification, and now suddenly you've got 7 athletes of the same class. Now you need to move those athletes who are not in that class to another pit. And we do have some diagrams for that. So then I think the last thing we've got is the age division. Our age divisions now match the WPA, with the exception that we do have the futures, which are the under 7s. That's not a junior national event, but certainly something on a local and regional level. We want to highly encourage athletes as young as possible to be involved. For competition, we have the U11, which is 7, 8, 9, 10, and U14, which is the 11, 12, and 13-year-olds. And that is their date of birth at the end of the year. That's why on the record form, it has the year that they were born, because at that point, it really doesn't matter what day and month. If they were born in that year, they convert, which is always confusing for athletes who are competing as a 13-year-old, but they turn 14 later in the year, and now as a 13-year-old, they're competing in the U17. So that's very confusing for a lot of parents. So it's always good to kind of keep this kind of chart around so you can explain it easier to them. The Masters is a little different. That is their age, the day of competition. That's the 35 plus, the 50 plus, and the 60 plus. And that age divisions are consistent with the WPA as far as the date that those go into effect. All right, so I think that's all of that. That's going to be an easy, quick thing that we'll have available on the website for you to kind of have available to you. All right. Phil, looking through next.
Okay, so I unmuted myself. I apologize before my TV started to talk. So we're going to move on to standards. So the qualifying standards for junior nationals are set on sex, age group, and classification of the athlete. They have not changed from last year. We may tweak a couple of them in field. We always have a problem in field. Just to give you a higher perspective of standards, we built the standards so approximately 75% of the population can get through to go to junior nationals. With respect to track, it's fine. Those standards are within striking distance of U.S. Paralympic emerging elite standards, and we base our standards off of those U.S. Paralympic standards and work our way down with respect to age. In field, that isn't the case. We need to do a better job in field of getting our athletes to do better in field so that as they mature, 17, 18, 19, they in fact can start to approach an emerging elite status so that we can build Paralympic field throwers as well as we have with track. Standards can be attained at Move United level 2 or level 3 meets, or at a high school, college, or WPA or USATF meet that is certified and sanctioned. If you have go to the next slide, please, Jess. If you are outside of those level 2 meets and level 3 meets, you need to provide a proof of performance, and those proof of performance forms are on the forms page of the Adaptive Track and Field USA website. We have A and B standards. The A standard is your right to go to junior nationals for that event. And then we have adopted a B standard, similar to what the Paralympics has for A and B standards. If you have an A standard in track, and then you have not made the A standard, but you've made the B standard in other events, then when you go to junior nationals, you are able to do those other events as long as you qualified with a B standard. We established this about 3 or 4 years ago because we didn't want a parent to make that hard decision that an athlete only made one event, and so why am I going, or why should I expend that amount of money? So the B standards, which are 5% off of the A standards, will allow more athletes to participate once they have gotten an A standard in track or field. So if you have one in track, then the B standards apply to track only. If you have an A standard in field, then the B standards apply to field only. Okay. The standards can be found in 2 locations on the website. We have a standards table, which is on the standards page. And then you can always find the standards specifically for your class and age group on our database page. Next page, please. Results. Let me just go back. Denise talked about wind gauges. The reason it's such a concern is, you can stay there, Jess. The reason the wind gauges are a concern is that if you're running a new meet, a lot of the high school timing associations don't have wind gauges because they don't need them. So it's an important thing that you ask. The masters and the open group, we used to allow them to establish records at our level 2 meets. That was to fill in the tables because they were all empty. Now that those tables have started to fill in, we're only going to allow the records to be achieved at level 2 meets. Anti-doping is the other point that isn't in that document that I wanted to cover for a few seconds. Last year, we could have anti-doping on call at a level 3 meet. And then if a world record were set at that meet, we could call in anti-doping to do their doping test on that individual. That is no longer the case. So now if you're running a level 3 meet and you have a potential world record or a number of world records that could be attained at that meet, you need to arrange on-site anti-doping for the meet going forward. Dual pits, we have dual pits. If you have a big meet and you're running fast, if you could set up 2 pits and one set of officials between those 2 pits, as one athlete is throwing, another athlete can get in the chair, it'll make that go better. Denise mentioned cages. We have pictures of cages and different scenarios of cages on the website. You can go see that. Denise mentioned liquids. We are in COVID state now, so all liquids have to be sealed. You can no longer have, water tubs and give out water that's not in tubs. And you really can't do that at a level 3 meet either because of that. Okay, and then officials for the new officials test will be available sometime around December 15th. So everyone has to requalify for this year. Results. Results are on the database, and we have the height, and we have the hyperlink here to that thing. And we have all the forms that you need for proof of performance on the forms page at the website. So you should be able to go there. This year, we're excited because we've added grafting. We will add grafting to the results page, and we will add the the percentage of the U.S. Paralympic A standard to the results page. So an athlete will be able to see on the graph as they're progressing and through this. And I'm sorry we don't have time today to show you that. I really wish we did, but we will in the next few weeks have a separate session that you can see that. But it should be up and running prior to the end of the year. So Kevin Kreitzer has done a great job in doing that. Next page, Jess, please. Records. We keep the records for all the classes and age groups in the United States. They're on our website. Juniors, opens, and master records can be set at level 3 meets and at other registered, recognized WPA meets. Those documents can come to us. Denise mentioned that you must fill out those record forms. They have to be filled out correctly. We hate to refuse a record because it wasn't filled out correctly. But if you're at a level 3 meet and you don't have and you didn't do your weights and measures, we can't accept those records. So please follow the rules for those, and so that we don't deny any athlete the records that they deserve. We set those records at least once before in the spring before junior nationals, and hopefully once after junior nationals and at the end of the year. Next page, please. Records are displayed on the ATF USA results page, and they're also displayed in the records table. And we need to, and you should be able to see that as you go through that. It's also, the record is also on the results page. So an athlete, when they do their 100 meters, you'll see their result. You'll see the junior nationals A and B standards. You'll see the national record for that event. And then you'll see now the percentage of the US Paralympic A standard. Next page. Okay. And these are resources. So you have a couple questions, I think. One question from Carol Keller: will the new SAMs be available? So this is where we are. We have SAMs as it exists today. It will be used if you're using SAMs. So for reporting results, I think Paul mentioned this yesterday if you were at the call. If you're a level 1 meet or a level 2 meet, you can submit spreadsheets and that would be fine. At a level 2 meet, we typically have either SAMs or we have high tech for track and field, and you can submit your information that way. SAMs, the new SAMs is being developed and will be online for 2022, and we will distribute a current version of SAMs for 2021. And we will probably, hopefully, trial the 2022 version at 1 or 2 meets in the spring for that. Okay, here are the reasons.
Bill, I
Yes.
think her specific question was, will SAMS be able to generate a report with all of the demographics required for each meet?
Yes, it does that. SAMS does that. The results coming back from SAMS gives Paul everything that he needs for demographics. As long as you've gone and filled in those fields on the athletes, it will. And we will make sure that if Move United and Paul add any information to that to the questionnaire, we'll make sure that we update the current version of SAMS so that when you do report your results at SAMS, it will meet those criteria.
Well, they always ask me for a separate form, even though I submit my results in SAMS, and that was why I was asking, because it seems kind of silly to have to
Okay, Carol, we'll take that offline and I'll work with you, me and Kevin to make sure that, and Paul, to make sure that we can correct that so that we have, we can build that in to Sam's and make sure that you don't have to do it twice.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
So we are at time. I saw Cindy had a question about qualifying times, and whether we'll allow times from August 1st, 2019 forward for next year's Junior Nationals.
Yes, and I put that into the presentation. So yes, qualifying standards start August 1st of 2020. So if you have a qualified meet and you like the Texas regional meet that was just held, those times and throw distances will be honored.
I think she's asking if we could go back a year, extend it for a year, since there wasn't very much happening in 2020. So I don't know if you have an opinion on that now. So why don't you think on that, and then we'll get that out as an answer.
Okay.
And I think we all knew that these sessions were going to feel a little rushed, and we do apologize for that. But thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Up here on the screen now it's contact information for Phil and Denise. And then I think Charisse is on the call. I think I saw you come in. Charisse is from US Paralympics, recently given a new title of Director of US Paralympics Track and Field. So congratulations, Charisse. This is a general email address for her and her phone number, but I think you can reach her through that. And thank you guys for coming and joining us today. And hopefully we'll see you on one of our next sport sessions. So everyone have a great day.
Bye, thank you.